E humai kai ke mai una mai una mea una no e una mele e humai e humai kai ke mai una mai una mea una no eu una mele e umai kai ke mai una mai una mea una no eu una mele e umai e
So Leo, as the story goes, came into the room and simply asked his father on his dying bed, "Father, what is it you want me to be or do?" And Kamehameha looked at him and said, "I want you to be a hookanaka. I want you to be a person of worth." So that's where it came about. And we looked at, and when I looked at it, and in terms of naming our project, I couldn't have found a more apropos title for a description for our project. We are in the process of trying to make lost souls, basically, people who have lost their way. We are trying to make them persons of worth again to themselves and to their families and their communities, you know.
Stephen, the executive director of Blueprint for Change, put together a group called the Family Reunification Working Group. And through the Family Reunification Working Group, got a law passed in 2015, I believe it was, Act 16, which requires the Department of Public Safety to ask 2 questions on their intake form. Are you a parent, and how many children under the age of 18 do you have? They did a pilot test for us, or a pilot data set for us in, I think it was February 2016, and it showed about 600 children impacted by incarceration statewide. We believe that number is low. So that then led us down another path to see what could be done to address this huge number. There were 2 strategies that the Family Reunification Working Group came up with. One was to look at programs and services geared towards children of incarcerated parents, and the second was to address the parents being away. And what are the strategies we can do to bring the parents home healed and whole in order for them to be a part of their family unit and then the larger community.
It's time to bring Hawaii's inmates home.
That's the opinion of a task force formed to address concerns regarding the high number of Native Hawaiians in prison. Olena Hugh reports.
A 9-member Native Hawaiian Justice Task Force, enacted by lawmakers last year, spent the summer meeting with community members and inmates here in Hawaii and abroad to address concerns related to incarcerated Native Hawaiians.
Unfortunately, we found that Hawaii's system does not equal up.
The committee says after speaking with 159 people across the state and inmates from several prisons and local transitional homes, they realize there are not enough programs to assist those in and out of prison.
What we're calling for are significant systemic changes within the correctional system to provide proper programs for education, for job skill readiness.
They're always looking, seeking to get some guidance, some help, but there's just not enough resources out there, for them.
With approximately 6,000 inmates total, task force officials say Native Hawaiians account for close to a quarter of the population.
You have to ask the question, why? We don't have the complete, comprehensive answer to why.
The group reveals 38 recommendations for lawmakers to review. One of the suggestions is to bring Hawaii's inmates on the mainland back home.
the state could be providing very similar programs and services here in Hawaii.
The State Department of Public Safety says it costs $127 a day to house inmates in Hawaii and $65 a day to house them on the mainland. But the panel says it's not just about finances.
We have become aware of a number of civil rights violations and even human rights violations.
A lot of them torn apart from their families. They don't see their children anymore. So there's a lot of issues involved, and that's just one of the things.
Task force members hope that lawmakers will implement some of their suggestions. Olena Hugh, KHON2 News, Hawaii's news leader.
Around the same time, Uncle Joe Tassel was asked by the governor to step down from the Hawaiian Homes Commission, of which he was a commissioner, to begin to convene a group of people who could look at Act 117, which was passed in 2012, and called for to take a look at alternatives to incarceration. Specifically, what is pu'uhonua? What does it look like? What does it mean? How much would it cost? Who would be the players in this? And so in 2015, July of 2015, we began meeting with Uncle Joe and a bunch of other stakeholders, community organizations, incarcerated people, families of incarcerated people. And what we came up with is the path of least resistance, that we like to refer to it, the low-hanging fruit, which was to develop a curriculum, a culturally based curriculum that could reconnect former offenders to their cultural root values, practices, and principles. So the group decided then, we looked at a bunch of different options. How are we going to get this done? Who's going to be the developers? How are we going to pay for this? Around the same time, there was a RFP, a request for proposals from the Administration for Native Americans, which is a federal agency under the Administration for Children and Families. And so we decided really quickly and easily that we'd go after this grant. We'd go after it with the objective of creating a curriculum, a culturally based curriculum, based on the Hawaiian moon calendar, Kaulana Mahina, as well as to create a video that would act as sort of a community awareness raising thing, but also to give some context and some depth into what it is we're actually trying to do to accomplish with this grant. The framework of the curriculum is Kaulana Mahina, the Hawaiian moon calendar. And that idea came from one of our original group members, Kalehau Kamau'u, who had a vision of having a curriculum that reconnects former offenders or pa'ahau to their culture. And what better way to do so than through the Kaulana Mahina, the Hawaiian moon calendar.
I had developed a curriculum a few years back. And this came after the result of, while I was on the inside, I done some time in prison and stuff like that. And while I was there, especially after they shipped us abroad, away from our homeland, cut off from everything over here, there was a strong need among many of us, not just myself, but many of us to continue with our practices, our recognition of important dates to us, and at that time it was like Kuhio Day, Kamehameha Day, not forgetting these things. So when we went up there, myself and a few other guys, we started this program called Kokako Pu'uhonua. It was like our safe place where we could go meet and learn from each other. You know, there was no professors or among us. I mean, you know, but everybody had mana'o. You know, we had mana'o from here, we had taro farmers up there, we had fishermen up there, we had hula dancers, and so the whole thing was encouraging guys, come forward, share what you know, I share what I know, and together we're going to learn together. You know, we was recognizing these dates, educating them on that. Public safety didn't like that. They went shut down the program. So that was the beginning of our struggle to get the program up and going again. And it eventually turned into a lawsuit. Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation got involved. And the thing went all the way, and then there was a settlement in 2004. We entered into a memorandum agreement, and they had to recognize the makahiki. They had to allow us to meet at least once a week. And there were certain things outlined that pretty much allowed pa'ahau their right to practice their religion. All in all, you know, we're all fighting for that same purpose, that same good, better cause to allow Kanaka Maoli on the inside to address or create something that can allow them to address the issues that we have today, which landed us in prison in the first place, through traditional Hawaiian approaches. Since then, I had developed, if you will, a curriculum, and it is based off of the moon. And the one thing about the moon, and one of the other brothers in our group, Ramsey, he said this, one thing about the moon, that's our oldest kupuna. And one thing, no matter where you go in the rural, you're going to see them. But this one, the thing allowed, to the bare minimum once a week. Once a week we get on different observance, Ku. The next week, Lono. The next week, Kanaloa, Kane. And go again the next month. And then you go every week, it's a different observance and different protocol. We go in, we do Ku protocol. We learn these things. And when we go in, we do that. And then the next week, it's a different protocol again. So we're learning Oro-Oli, we're learning the protocol, we're learning these things, but most of all, we're learning the kuleana, like what does it, what mean, what ku, okay, fathers in there, you get grandfathers, you get brothers, what that mean, you go and stand strong and all that, what you bad, you beef kind of action like that. Aole, we get kuleana, we come outside, we get a family, people depend on us, and then we set examples for the next generation. They're looking at us. We come out, many of the kids come out, we're heroes, they're looking at us and they're watching us and they're going to be like us. So what we continue, that's the thing. Like even with the halimua and stuff like that, there's a rite of passage we go through to become a man. You take you from the wahini's house and now you're with the man, you're going to learn your kuleana. You put on the malo. We never have that for many of us. But for plenty, has. Today it's different, kuleana, the sports now, papuana, that's all good stuff. That teaches kuleana, that teaches discipline, and that's what the halimua did, which many of us, especially those on the inside, when miss, they never go through that. When we was up there, you had the Native Americans. Everybody's recognized. All these groups, they all recognized, but not Hawaiians. They used to trip out. They used to think, wow, what's going on? How come they're not recognizing you guys? You guys gotta do this. We do this. We recognize our different things. And the tribe we was with up there in Minnesota, them guys, they recognized they had 4 different things, the 4 different seasons. And they recognized them with everything that they do. They got the sweat, weekly in fact, the sweat. They got their drum ceremonies, so, and the banquets even, so we was just trying to get them to do the same thing. And the laws are on the books, it's in the U.S. Constitution, even the state constitution outline about the Hawaiian religion and practices. But still, they would not recognize it. And they still not recognizing them even until today. I think one of the reasons we went in the first place is because we had lost connection with who we are as Kanaka, and loss of identity. I strongly believe that the replacing of that, or the grabbing of that identity, the reaffirming of that in ourselves, will be the beginning of one healing process.
On the actual day of annexation, the Queen shuttered herself at Washington Place, surrounded by her court, by the princes, by her ladies-in-waiting, and they had a solemn picture taken. On the other side at Iolani Palace, there were sharpshooters pointed out. There was still tension in the air that something might happen, but when the Hawaiian flag was lowered, it was said that it was cut into small little 2 to 3 inch ribbons and given out as tokens of remembrance to the sons and daughters of the missionary families, so that they could keep those as little tokens of their great victory over the Hawaiian kingdom and the end of the tyranny of the Hawaiian monarchy.
Prior to the overthrow in 1893, we had one of the highest literacy rates in the world. You know, we were on the way to establishing a constitutional monarchy equivalent to, you know, Great Britain. Shoot, we had developed treaties with the United States and other countries. We were light years ahead of a lot of people, a lot of other countries, you know, developing countries, in terms of progressiveness and becoming a nation as part of the world, you know. And then what happens is, with the overthrow in 1893, boom, the channel changes, right? And everything, the term Hawaiians we used in my early days was huli, you know, everything went, turned over, right? And so, you know, you can imagine, waking up one morning, you know, as a Hawaiian back in 1893, and you can't speak your language anymore. You're basically told that, you can't go farm your taro over here anymore. You can't go down to the beach to go catch your fish over here anymore. Everything's changed, you know. And what I like to tell people is, the overthrow only happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago? In the grand scheme of things, that's just a minutia in terms of time. 130 years, when you look at the history of the world, you know, 140 years is not that long ago. So don't tell me about revising history. And I really believe that the trauma that was caused to Hawaiian people at the overthrow has persisted today. It's become, I don't think it is, but I like to say it became part of our DNA almost, right? And the cultural conflict that we still see today between Hawaiians and Western society is still there. We still struggle with, trying to make our way in this world that still is very foreign to us.
Aloha. I've been working on incarceration for a long time, on justice issues in Hawaii, and the most stark thing that I've found in my 20-some-odd years of research is that incarceration of Native Hawaiians sort of picked up. I mean, the Queen was arrested, and it's never, ever stopped since then. She was arrested because she was trying to protect her people. And when you look at what's happening today, you say, wow, this is really interesting. Hawaiians got arrested for speaking Hawaiian in court. Hawaiians are arrested for protecting their sacred sites like Mauna Kea. They're arrested for exercising their traditional and customary rights that are actually enshrined in the Constitution. They're protected. And yet people are being arrested for doing what their ancestors have done since time immemorial. So when we look at those things, you have to say something is really wrong. And what's really wrong is that Hawaii refuses to actually talk about racism. We like to say we're a melting pot and everybody is treated equally. That is not true. People are being arrested for being Hawaiian. This is outrageous. And in 2010, OHA did a report with George Washington University, University of Hawaii, and a bunch of researchers. I was on that committee. And actually, when you look at Native Hawaiians who are incarcerated, they are incarcerated for longer, they're arrested more often, their parole and probation is longer. You can't look at that and say everybody's treated equally. That is not true, because drug use is pretty even across the economic spectrum. And when you look at our data, and the latest data I have is from July 2017, that was given to the HCR 85 Correctional Reform Task Force, that showed that 72.2% of all the people incarcerated by Hawaii, the ones here and the ones abroad, 72.2% are in for the lowest felony, for misdemeanors, petty misdemeanors, violations, parole and probation, technical violations, not new crimes. What are we doing? It costs roughly $50,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. And what are we doing? We're incarcerating people who are suffering from mental health and substance misuse issues, people who are unemployed, people who are illiterate, people who are houseless. This is not what prisons were about. You know, basically, the way that Hawaiians dealt with it, there was a pu'uhonua, and somebody could swim to that, and if they made it, then they would go before the kahuna and really reflect on their actions, because their actions affected the entire society. And what the government doesn't understand is that when they incarcerate one person, it is not one person. That person comes from a family, and that family lives in a neighborhood, and that neighborhood is in a community. It affects everybody. So when they say that we want to protect the community, what we're actually doing is we're creating a huge criminal underclass with people who have minor violations that were mere sanctions only decades ago.
Yeah, I think there has been enough research done, and there are enough journals, if you would, studies that have demonstrated once again, time and time again, that Native Hawaiians tend to be at the top of all the wrong lists, whether it's health, education, and in this case, incarceration. And so one has to ask the serious questions of why is that the condition that is manifesting itself in this community? Primarily in the host community. This is the place that we're from. Why aren't we in a much better position? Regardless of how much money we may be throwing at it, because frankly, we've got some fairly big institutions targeting this particular population, and yet we continue to see, well, we've seen some improvements for the large part, that we continue to see facilities like our prisons and jails being overpopulated by Native Hawaiians. So the question is why? What is that? So I think if, again, we reframe what the prison system represents, not just in the judicial system, but in a societal system, to the individual who finds him or herself in that situation or repeatedly returning to that, the recidivism of that. What does this facility represent? And my observation would be that these facilities are providing provide for a structure, an external structure that takes the place of an internal structure that is lacking. If I don't have the ability internally to structure my life, my behaviors, my practices, my relationships, what I may end up doing is behaving in such a way that those structures would then be imposed upon me. And as much as I don't like being in the physical structure called a jail or a prison, I don't have the internal structures, the capacities, because somewhere in my history, either mine, generationally, multi-generationally, somewhere we lost that. We lost the ability to find that compass within. And everywhere we look, externally, it's somebody else's structure. It's not our own. So I don't think we can deny that at some point in time in our history, and we know there was an overthrow, there was the loss of language, the penalization of using cultural practices, the taking away of principles of religion and spirituality, essentially stripping a person of their identity, stripping a person from the ability to find comfort, direction, leadership. Then you have to rely heavily on an internal compass. In the absence of the internal compass, you begin to look outside for externalities to guide and direct you. Well, when those are foreign to you, what do? Right? And so I suspect in many ways that this is one of the things, the underlying reasons and or causes, if you would, that contributes to this ongoing behavior, right? I don't know how to manage. Nothing is mine. The land was taken, the language was taken, the religion was taken. And now I'm subscribing to things that are not of me. And despite the fact that many of us are being educated in a contemporary educational system, it's still someone else's system. It's still a different value set. It doesn't connect us back to the way our kupuna were. So I think what this represents to us is an external structure system in the absence of our own. And more importantly, the decisions that are being made about how we interact with that system is also being decided by others. And so, to a certain degree, we are victimizing the victims once again. That does not excuse poor behavior. Let me be clear about that. But there's a reason for that behavior, and not just excuses.
Recommendation. A sixth recommendation was that prisoners who are housed on the mainland should be allowed to practice their cultural traditions in mainland prisons. We found that when they went from Hawaii to the mainland, they suddenly were no longer able to practice their religious convictions.
They're actually trying to, I know Saguaro right now in this is trying to do, where we house 1,500 prisoners, in this part of Saguaro, they have this place called the Faith Pod. And in the Faith Pod, they're actually trying to implement some of these things. I've seen prisoners actually doing hakas as a group.
I'm so glad to hear that,
yes.
because those are the very things that at one time were prohibited.
Yep. And so I know that they're trying to work that in, and a lot of the prisoners have been, saying that we need this, and it's part of us, and we need to be able to do it on a regular basis.
First of all, I want to read a quote from someone who testified before us, and this was someone who had served significant amount of time in prison. And at the time, he had been released when he testified before us. Listen to this quote. "You can't put me in a small office and do individual counseling because I feel smothered. I feel cluttered in a small little room. I had my individual counseling in the loy, pulling tarot with my counselor. I had my individual counseling bouncing in the water, in the ocean. They took me outside the building because universe, Hawaii, ha, language, oli, kahea, stories, legends, all those things. In a group setting, like I said, Ho'oponopono style, going out to paddle, taking the services outside while practicing my culture at the same time," end of quote. Now that is a tremendously powerful quote from someone who benefited from culturally based practices. In terms of my own experience as a family court judge, one of the saddest things for me was on my juvenile criminal calendar. I had about 1,800 cases on my juvenile criminal calendar. And let me tell you the way it would go. A 15-year-old boy would come in before me, a 16-year-old girl, a 17-year-old boy, and I would say to them, "What is it that you care about? What do you have passion for? What do you get up in the morning for?" And do you know the number one answer?
What?
Nothing. They would say, "Judge, I have passion for nothing." That was very traumatic for me to hear. And that was by far the most common answer. Now, if I took that young man or young woman and I sent them to an immersion school, or I sent them to a charter school, and then they came back for their 6-month review, and I said to them, "What is it that you have passion for? What is it you care about?" I couldn't get them to stop talking. In that short period of time, they had become connected with their Hawaiian culture. They had become connected with the land. They had become connected with the language. They for once in their life, felt good about themselves and good about their genealogy. So I saw firsthand how critical culturally based programs are to Native Hawaiians.
Oh, yeah.
For the most part, most of the guys just lounge around up there in Halava and just evolve into what's there. And up there is a breeding ground for crime and gangs and drugs. And all you do all day long think about how you're going to hustle the next load for coming in, and how you're going to get high, or you'll make a little bit of money so you can buy the next bunch or the next load coming in and pay the guard and stuff like that. And that's that whole culture of prison. So if we can get one puhonu where they can go to, instead of young guys coming in, they like be a part of something. Plenty of them come from broken homes. They come in, they get gangs promising them, "Oh, we got your back. You're gonna be with us. We together. You need anything?" You know, they give them and stuff like that. If we can create the same thing in one pu'uhonua, where you come over here. In fact, I had proposed that, you know, up there at Halava, that we set aside one whole block, turn the whole block into one healing community. In fact, one faith block, where not only Kanaka Maoli, but Christians, if they like, come, or Muslims, Native American, any religion, they're going to come, and it's going to be one safe environment for them practice their religion. Going to be one healing, promote reconnection and stuff like that. As opposed to the modules where it's freaking Thunderdome over there. You know what I mean? It's like survival of the fittest. So you know, that's the alternative, you know. Why not create pu'uhonua?
First, I think it's important to state that the overrepresentation of Native Hawaiians in the criminal justice system is real. It's a fact that's been known for many years. We know that Alulike has been doing studies on this since the mid to late 70s. So it's been, you know, over 40 years plus that we've known about this. And I think it's time for us as community people to address it. Mainly because over the last 40 years we can see that nothing really has been done to address this specific issue, the overrepresentation of Native Hawaiians. I think the Department of Public Safety has its framework that it works within, and it has its theories of what works and what doesn't. We're not in any way saying or targeting them at all. All we're doing is acknowledging what it is and how it is currently. And so, for example, they put a lot of focus on job readiness and things like that, which is important, and housing, which is important as well. But I think our group believes that without the deeper connection to self and to place, you can do all the employment training, you can do all the housing you want. Something doesn't happen with just that. So our hypothesis, our premise is that through cultural reconnection to values, to principles, to practices, to self, to ohana, to community, to aina, is going to be their foundation from which to work from which to get a job from. And I think our hypothesis is the fact that with this foundation of identity and connection to place, it's a lot easier for someone to be resilient in situations where otherwise they wouldn't be. So our thinking is that if a person is released, ex-offender is released, and they've gone through our training, they're connected to themselves, their culture, their aina, their family, their community. If at any point they have to stop and question themselves on what choice to make, they'll have that really deep-seated foundational connection to who they are and what they are, which we hope will allow them to make the right decision.
One thing I've always said, and I strongly believe this, is that, you know, if Hawaiians were given the opportunity to take care of our own kuleana, to bring all Hawaiians, create one healing facility, and put one pu'uhonua, and put everybody in that pu'uhonua, we would solve the state's problem. They wouldn't have an overcrowded situation if they would let all the Hawaiians, thrown to the Hawaiians, hey, we take care of that kuleana. We make our own, this is how we're going to handle them. You know what I mean? They've been handling our kuleana ever since the overthrow, and they have a poor history of managing.
The impact on a culture is something that I think Western society does not understand, because our culture, Hawaiian culture, is just full of all the things that the people needed to live. So somebody asked me, a while ago, where are all the carvers, the master carvers? And a Hawaiian man said, they're all in prison. I was speechless. And then I started to think about the people who are the poi pounders, the people who create the poi pounders, the people who are the stone cutters, the people who practice traditional things that made our culture so unique and so amazing. And to think that we're throwing them away. And that's what happens when you put people in prison. You throw them away. And basically, the department and the government would like you to ignore those people. So there's been a bill at the legislature for family visitation that had widespread support. It was amazing. Lots and lots of testimony from a broad cross-section of the community. That bill died. Why? We know that family, keeping people connected is something that's absolutely crucial to reduce recidivism. And yet we continue to do that, to separate families. And we sever the ties that bind, and then we blame people for that. So the government has created a lot of the problems that we now are trying to cope with. And there are so many things we could do. You suggested a campus environment. You know, I've been talking to a lot of architects and people around the world about what do we do? There are some people that need to be separated. They need a time out to kind of figure out what's going on. And those people, they need to be separated from society, but they don't need to be tortured. They need to be restored. They need to be educated. And there are ways to do that.
Pu'uhonua is a place of refuge, sanctuary. And it's as simple as that. When someone in ancient Hawaii committed a crime, it was in their best interest to get to Pu'uhonua before those who were pursuing them to hold them accountable for their crimes, usually punishable by death, before those people could get to him or her. It wasn't always that easy to get to Pu'uhonua. Sometimes you had to enter through the ocean or climb mountains or what have you. But if you could get there, you could find refuge, and those pursuing you to judge you for your crime were not allowed to touch you. People were given a lot of time to themselves. There were very little distractions, and most of the inner work was done through normal daily activities. Whatever chores that needed to be done, whatever work there was that needed to be done. There were things to plant and harvest. There were animals to tend to. It was very simple. It was actually living and doing the things that you're supposed to in order to survive and to thrive.
With the concept of Malama Pu'uhonua, when I first started working with Nawihine Ui, we actually asked the women what Pu'uhonua was to them. But that was after I thought about what I think as Pu'uhonua. We understand that Pu'uhonua is a safe place. It's a place where people who maybe did a transgression in traditional society, when they got there, they could repent and they didn't get killed and so forth. But when, as women, a pu'uhonua is really important, because if we don't feel like our body is a pu'uhonua, if we don't feel like the space we live in is a pu'uhonua, we're constantly stressed out because of our maternal instinct. You know, because usually as a woman, we're not only taking care of ourselves, we're usually taking care of others. So first, the pu'uhonua starts personally, physically, and we have to see our body physically as a safe place and a place that needs to be sacred. Then after that, we need to make sure that everything around us is a pu'uhonua, meaning is a safe space, so that we can grow and grow our families, grow what we're doing, and so forth. So identifying what that means, what elements make that happen, is really part of that Malama Pu'uhonua when working with the Nawihine Ui. We're gonna take the word sacrifice. As women, we sacrifice ourselves, we sacrifice everything for other people. That's how we are as a gender. We're gonna take sacrifice and we're gonna turn it into sacred. So that when we look at everything, we're not always giving, giving, giving. We make sure that we are solid, safe, a pu'uhonua, before we can help others. Yeah.
One of my kumu, Auntie Ulu Garmin, had, taught a bunch of us about this hoku kaheva, and it is about it's about being able to face the heva and to be able to release and not let it control you, because if you let the heva control you, then you're stuck in a cycle. Yeah, and then you keep repeating the negative behavior. And so it's really to look at that and to come to some understanding and some peace with that, and so that you can let it go. And like Auntie Ulu says, it's not about forgiving and forgetting. It's about forgiving and not allow it to control you anymore. And so you're able to release. So during our curriculum, we spent a lot of time there, just talking story about, like the heva that happened to them and the heva that they did and the consequences, how it affected them, and then in turn, how their heva affected others. And so we spent a lot of time there going over all of that part there until we got to a point where in the time frame that we were given, that they were able to release as much as they were willing to. And that's not everything. That's just a part of it, just a small little part of it. This journey of Kane Kanaka is a lifelong journey. So we let go some stuff, we pick it up again, we pick up new things, and we let go, and it's just that cycle that we go through.
Yes, so one of the coolest projects, I think, we didn't think it was going to be that cool, but it turned out to be even more cooler than we expected, was going and volunteering with the police force in the town area, which encompasses Fernhurst. But one of the cool things about that is that the Fernhurst ladies actually got trained by the police officers to be a citizen watch group, which is such an interesting thing. But if you think about it, I would want women like them patrolling my beat or where I live, because they would know what to look for. And so because of that, we were involved in a service project to help clean up the Alawai area right by the convention center. And it was wonderful to see us, the women, working alongside all the new recruits in the police force, and them just giving like 150%. In the sign waving, they were just having a ball, trying to make people honk, and one of the funniest things is seeing these women go, hey, stop texting, you're gonna get into an accident, calling people on them breaking the law was, for me, really hilarious, but wonderful, right? Because now they're looking at their community in a different way, right? They're not looking at it as that they may be a victim. They look at it like they are empowered to make our community a better place. That's what I saw from the sign waving. Then when we got to go and clean up behind at the Alawai, they were the best. I'm not biased. They just went for it. We had the stairs, the grand staircase that goes all the way up to they went to the top and just got all the rubbish from the top all the way down. We filled up bags super quickly. I was so impressed at the efficiency and that they weren't winded and they never complained, and they just got in there, and our stuff was done so quickly that they were like, what are we gonna do now? That's what I was like, oh my gosh, these women are awesome.
The Puhonua concept and then talked about becoming whole people in the whole hookanaka project, but also using concepts of the Lokahi triad. And then we introduced them to Hawaiian values and concepts through the Lokahi triad, Keakua, Aina, and Kanaka, and where they are now trying to tap into that balance, that Lokahi of the triad, yeah. Then we went into the Kane and Kanaka concept, being Kane and being Kanaka. And that, from that first meeting, could see already the thing just sinking in, and this guy's just soaking it up, and you could see it, even in the body language and just their look, it's like, oh, what is this? And so, and that night had a full moon too, and we introduced the Mahina calendar. So I forget what full moon it was, but it was full moon. Just from that first session, the guys were already sharing their own insights about not having this kind of education or exposure to culture, which most of them are Kanaka, but them being imprisoned in the justice system for so long and being out of touch. Just this initial meeting was just filling them already, and it set them up for the things that we were doing afterwards too. Yeah. So.
Yeah. A lot of them, they trip out. They're like, they never been exposed to anything like that before. They just trip and they drink them up and they love it. And even until today, I run into people, I'm down Ala Moana, coming out of the water, and one kid run up to me all tatted out, and I don't even remember. And this happens a couple of times, and they tell me, oh, uncle, come, meet my mother them. They introduce me to them, and they tell me, oh, this is the kind on the inside, that's why we went to his program, and all that kind like that. Oh, make me feel real good. But today, he's living a good life, they work, but there's a lot, and Steve, when I came home, he was with OHA. That's how I met him. So he was in the human services part, and he was instrumental in helping us get a lot of resources to send up. So when I came home, we was pretty much rolling. The groups up there, at one time we had 3 facilities at Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Arizona. So we had to find people who go into each one for the makahiki, go up about a week earlier so they can, cook out with the guys and get them ready, and also too the aha'aina at the end, the ho'okupu we would send up for the ceremonies, the makahiki ceremony, and materials, kihe, malo, ipu, things like that.
The concern and question I think a lot of people have asked is how realistic, or what's the real true potential of us reestablishing a pu'uhonua type system or practice in a contemporary world that has become so accustomed, for one reason or another, to the notion of putting those that have harmed others, real or imagined, right, away. And I think that's an important concept, because we live in a society that is accustomed to throwing things away. We are a disposable society. So we're having this conversation about pu'uhonua in a larger context of a society that looks at disposing of things that are no longer shiny, or no longer contributing, or something that requires much more energy and inconveniences me, right? So I think to answer a question or to consider the conversation of what's the reality of pu'uhonua, I think you have to do it in that context, at least one of those slivers. Until we begin to really shift people's minds to knowing that these are humans, right? People of spirit, perhaps damaged spirits, who are acting in ways and behaving in ways that are inconsistent with our convenience, our societal understanding. That in order for that to happen, in order for them to get into that alignment, is to address, one, that there was a misalignment at some point in time, and that they can be a realignment. Now granted, there are people that have done some things that perhaps may not only be unforgivable, but irreparable. How do you repair those kinds of things? But are they still resources? Can they still contribute? Is there a way of doing that? So there is a spectrum. I won't deny that there are some individuals that belong in incarceration. But for the most part, I don't think those that are there for minor infractions are receiving the kind of treatment and or rehabilitation associated with the concept of correction. To take someone who is antisocial, at least diagnosed antisocial, to put them in a room in the absence of people to enhance their social interaction doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent with an outcome to say, we're going to put you here to become more social because of your current antisocial behavior. There is no logic to that, right? So the realities come down to what is our criteria, what is logical, what do we think? And in this conversation, we haven't even talked about justice. Punishment is just one form of dealing with the problems in our society. That's just one way. But that has seemed to be the preferred way of dealing with these kinds of things, what we call injustice. Where is the justice in that? And I think that's the challenge that we will have, continue to have, whether it's Pu'uhonu or any other system that asks us as a society to begin to look at those who are perpetrating crimes as people. They may have elected and selected to do something that for a moment removed them from that category because they may have done some inhumane things. But how do we get them back to that humanity? What is that? And to treat them inhumanely certainly does not do that.
Why is Blueprint, why should Blueprint be the one to carry out this mission? And for good reason. I think we had a lot of time to think about that, and we even brought it to our board and asked, is this close enough to our mission? Are we drifting? And again, unanimously, the board agreed that no, we are absolutely not mission drifting. This is something that has been going unaddressed for many years. And because Blueprint's mission is to provide prevention type services to families at risk of child abuse and neglect, we know that a parental incarceration is a ACE now, adverse childhood experience, which we know ACEs leads to a whole bunch of health disparities and social disparities. So mainly that's our angle. I do want to say that this by no means is a Blueprint thing. It just so happens that Blueprint was a part of this hui who needed a quote-unquote fiscal sponsor to carry out this grant proposal, so to speak. So I really have to give honor and thanks and mahalo to everybody who was at the table. Not only everybody who was at the table, but everybody in the larger community who's been experiencing this for years upon years, generations even, We are not the first ones to talk about this. We are not the first ones to push for something like this. We are simply doing a continuation of all the work that's been done for the last 40 plus years by Alulike, OHA, a lot of different grassroots nonprofit organizations. So while I'd love to take credit for all of this, there's no way that we could do that. We just happen to be, again, in the right place at the right time, and again, connecting with Uncle Joe and believing wholeheartedly, 150% in his vision. And that's why we do what we do. That's why we continue to do. That's personally why I do what I do in this realm, is to honor Uncle Joe.
I think for our team, I just want to, our team has been amazing, and we've all been on this journey. Lavon Richardson, I have to, she is so funny. Yeah, I love her dearly. But, she comes to the table all the time, and we actually pay her a consulting fee, with our ANA funds, and she comes to the table and she goes, you guys, I'm learning so much from you guys. I should be paying you guys. You shouldn't be paying me. I'm learning so much, and I'm having so much fun, and I'm transforming myself. I should be paying you guys for what I'm doing. And I think that's kind of like the sentiment of the whole team, It's like, wow, we're doing something that's really, really really, really terrific here. And, we got a good thing going. None of us want to give up on it. Our funding runs out in a couple weeks, but I think we're all committed to sustaining this however way we can. So.
Yeah, Eho Kanaka is really about helping individuals not just stand up, right? But to do so in a way that there's pride in themselves and that they can instill it in others. But more importantly, in self. And to be able to connect again, right? And while there is ho'oponopono, making right with those around you, in some cases, those people may not be here anymore. So how do you continue living a life and leading a life, moving forward, looking ahead, not over your shoulder every day? With a direction, not just being driven, right, by fear, if anything, but by hope and promise. And Eho Kanaka, this notion of standing up and taking worth, is knowing that you are worth something, that you're worthy, and that you have a gift and you have something to offer in your community. And so it is our hope and our aspiration that Eho Kanaka, regardless of whether you're a Maoli, you're from this place, but if you are lost, if you are looking for a way, right, that there is hope, that there is a way of doing that. And whether you're from Hawaii or not, is if you can reconnect to your place, you can reconnect to the natural time of your place and your space. It doesn't have to be here in Hawaii, but every people, every indigenous community at some point in time that ate and survived off the land and the environment, they all subscribe to a system like this. So while we're subscribing to our ancestral practices of this aina, this land, this space, we like to believe that this sets a tone. It's an example for others of other places to begin to look at their ancestral training and their connections rather than to the linear grids and the four walls and the things that have been created for us in contemporary time for the purpose of economics and conveniences. It's not easy to be a farmer. It's not easy to be a fisherman. None of this was intended to be easy. But it's not any easier to be thrown into prison for 25 years and expected to come out and re-engage society as if nothing happened. Especially if there's no healing, no correction, no training, no aloha in that process. Yeah. So I think Ho'okanaka is about that. It's reconnecting people to place, people to people, people to principle. Yeah. So that you live by these principles. And hopefully be a principled person, right? A person of worth. Eho Kanaka.
I went to Kamehameha schools. I make this joke all the time. I graduated from Kamehameha in 1975. I started in second grade. And I make this joke all the time about I went to Kamehameha schools when they were making good Americans. Because when I was in school there, everything, they pushed English standard, grammar and punctuation and spelling, and vocabulary and math and science and what have you. And Hawaiian anything was an elective. And today it's a requirement. My joke continues to say that today Kamehameha schools makes Hawaiians, they grow Hawaiians. I'm grateful to be involved in this work, not only because of the women and the men that we're serving, that we're helping to piece back together, but for myself too. The pukas are being filled, and I guess the most that I can share is the best way that I can share is Ke kaualoha wale mai lata ua e ka mauna o ka hali upua I kua waloha me ka mahalo aloha aloha e Mahalo.
I had a school called Pali Ho'oponopono in Kona, and we dealt with druggies, dropouts, drunks, and pregnant teenagers. So I'm excited. We're talking about the youth, and I did that in there. When we went to high school to find out about this one student who just got dropped out of school because he got busted ripping off locker rooms at a football game, and we dropped him. So we were asked to come up to the school and see what we could do for the kid. First question we asked the young man, what you like to do? First question. Second question we asked him, how can we help you? He looked at us dumbfounded, never asked that question before in his life. We told him, take all the time you need, we get more time than money. Take all the time you need, but tell us what you like to do. He finally says, I'm scared in here. I'm the one in education. I don't think I can get to fill out one job application for work. My wife is pregnant. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kid. I need help. Calls up Jack Darwin, who's the president of the schools, and Fred Cachola, who's Extension Education Director. They come to the big coffee table, sit down, Papa let me go like this, pitch. Oh, this could be the biggest game I ever will pitch. And I told him the same thing. All we like to do is turn them from dependence into assets. This young man who got dropped out of school and was the first of Hollywood about 4 years ago, calls me up. Barajo, I never forget what you said. Never too late. Well, what I meant by that was, the four of us that started the school were all dropouts. And who knew the hardship about getting one job, then one dropout? You get 2 jobs, you get 3 guys, you know who don't get the job, right? The guy who never graduated, me. So what happens is, we come to a meeting and we agree one of us got to go back to school. 4 dropouts, one of us, at least one of us got to go back to school and get our GED. So they go like this. Will the volunteer step forward? The other 3 guys step back. Okay, I'll be the guinea pig. I go back to school. In a class of 16, I get my GED. I missed my 2 points to be the highest score. Just by 2 points. But you know what? Aweno who beat me was one of my colleagues' wife. And she went back to school in order that he go back to school too. So did we turn around? We even turned us around. Yeah. And I'm excited about this because I believe more so we should dedicate ourselves to prevention instead of correction. Get them before they get there. Get them before they get there.